I wouldn't have ascended to the job of CEO of PepsiCo without paid leave. Because early in my career as a consultant, 2 years after I started my career, I was given unexpectedly paid leave to take care of my father who was dying of cancer. It happened all of a sudden. And, I just needed time to take care of my father. I didn't know who to ask. But Boston Consulting just called me up out of the blue and said, we're giving you paid leave to take care of your father. Then I had paid leave to take care of my 2 kids when they were born. I had maternity leave for 12 weeks each. And then when I was in a terrible car crash, I was given paid leave too. So if I hadn't had that paid leave, I would have had to quit my job and don't know where my life would have gone because I have no idea how I could have re-entered the job after I quit it. And so, in many ways, I think I'm a product of nurturing from my companies who all believe that the only way to retain good talent was to give them paid leave for unexpected incidents in their life. Because nobody's life is a straight line. It goes through interesting twists and turns. And if you want to hold on to your best and brightest, you ought to be able to give people paid leave.
Thank you for sharing that. I so agree. And Anne-Marie, what's been your experience with paid leave and taking it and using it to fuel your goals and career?
Well, Maggie, I'll also say it's a great pleasure to be in conversation with you and always with Indra, who's been such a supporter of all these issues from the corporate side and well ahead of her time. Paid leave for me did the things that Indra described in terms of having our 2 children, but it had another effect that I think people don't necessarily understand in terms of allowing my husband to have an equal relationship with our 2 boys, which became critical down the line when he became lead parent and allowed me to go off to Washington and do other things. So I was a professor at top institutions that gave us each a semester off, because when you're a teacher, you can't just take 6 weeks. You have to either teach the whole class for 3 months or you don't teach at all. So I got a semester off, but at both places, at Harvard and Princeton, the father, also got a semester off, which meant I would take the first semester because I was breastfeeding and it was easier for those first 6 months or three and a half. And then Andy took the second one. And that meant by the end of the first year of each boy's life, he was an equally competent caregiver. He'd had just as much time as I had. He was just as good. In fact, he would say he was better at getting him to sleep or various things. But that was so important from the very beginning to set a pattern of we are equal caregivers. And I had confidence that he could do it. And he had confidence that he could do it. And of course he could, in a way that then enabled us to support one another, and particularly for him to support me down the road.
So, Anne-Marie, one thing I will say on paid leave is that coming from a corporate environment, we have to be very careful how much paid leave we give. Because at the end of the day, as a large company or as a small and medium-sized enterprise, we need the people to do the job. And if they step out and we guarantee their jobs when they come back, they can't be out for too long a time. I think we have to walk before we run. I think at a minimum, we've got to give people enough to recover from a childbirth, or the minimum amount of time required to take care of a sick or ailing member of the family. So I think it's important we look at paid leave as a human issue and start with saying, let's craft a program which gives people the minimum number of days to recover. Minimum number of days is defined by the woman or the caregiver, not defined by somebody who doesn't know what it is to give birth. And then figure out how to expand it downstream. But I think what's happening is people are thinking about other countries where they get 6 months leave for maternity and they go, oh, we can't do it. Hey, let's start with 10 weeks, 12 weeks. Let's start with something.
I think we agree there. And, at New America, you get 3 months. So let's start with 12 weeks. I'm perfectly fine with 12 weeks. And also there's evidence from other countries that if you're out too long, it's then harder for you to get back. So I'm just saying in the academy, you really don't have a choice because it's done by semesters. But I totally agree. I think 12 weeks is a great place to begin.
Yep.
It's an excellent starting point, but we've seen at the political level, at the federal level, we're talking about a 4 4-week proposal, which to me feels so low. How do we get from the 4-week proposal that is still not even legislation, it's not the law of the land, to the 10, 12 weeks that you guys are talking about, to even the 16 weeks that's my personal view, but 16 to 20 is probably the spot that I would love to see all women get. But how do we get there? How do we bridge those gaps? Anne-Marie, I'll start with you.
I mean, so there is always, of course, just the political game. And one reason I think that the Biden administration has been willing to whittle it back is because they think that once you put it in place, there will be strong and growing support for it. And so it will be easier to expand than some of the other things that have been in Build Back Better. And that is just the kind of nuts and bolts of hard-knuckled political bargaining. But I also think that we should be paying much more attention to the health and well-being of the child. New America did a study, the Better Life Lab with Bridget Schulte, about 3 or 4 years ago, looking at all the science of what is good for children. And they came back with a full year of leave, for either parent, which is definitely more than I think anybody is prepared to provide in the United States right now. But it's just like with pre-K, we know about how children's brains develop. What is good for children is good for the society as a whole. It is cost effective. It is the right thing to do and the smart thing to do. So one of the ways we continue to expand it is to prove that this is very important for children. And then another way is to demonstrate that actually businesses can find ways to make it work, whether they have people who are right under that person step into the job or they split jobs. And Indra can probably talk better about that. But I think there are a number of strategies to be used to expand a bare minimum, because 4 weeks is definitely barely enough time to recover. And for many of us, not enough time to recover.
You know, Maggie, to your point, I think what's happening is people are worried about the implementation and the consequences of putting in a paid leave program, which they know is the right thing to do, that they're now saying, why not we just not have this program at all? My point is, look, let's all agree it's a human issue. We need paid leave for maternity care, paternity care, and if there is unexpected illness in the family, we do need to give people paid leave because it's a right human issue. And we have to make sure people don't abuse paid leave. Because some of the conversation I've heard is that you give paid leave, it's a slippery slope, people will take it for every facetious reason. I think as long as there's integrity in this program and people don't abuse it, we should give paid leave. The good thing about COVID, the only good thing about COVID, it advanced all these remote technologies. So now you can give somebody 12 weeks and with work flexibility, you can still be with your infant until the baby is ready to be in a very good childcare system. So I actually believe that if we can stop talking about whether there should be paid leave to saying, how do we implement a 12-week paid leave policy? Start there. Just let's say that's our commitment. Let's do it. How do we make it easier for small and medium-sized enterprises who are the ones struggling the most to implement paid leave? What do they do when that person's out for 12 weeks? Who's going to pay for it? Who's going to replace that person? Because if you have 5 employees and somebody is gone, somebody has to do the job. So I think if we move from talking about paid leave to how do we help the SMEs implement paid leave, I think we have a fighting chance to get something done that's reasonable, as opposed to being caught up in this discussion for years. My God, Anne-Marie, I've seen your writing going back a decade on this issue.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that.
And actually, to both of your points, there was a National Bureau of Economic Research working paper released in November that indicated more small and medium-sized businesses, as defined as 10 to 99 employees, are supportive of paid leave. Based on data collected at the end of 2020, these businesses are seeing, and these business owners are seeing, the effect of the pandemic on their workers and how people do need this time to take care of their parents, take care of their children, respond to a family emergency. And I think they're seeing in real time that people can take that time off. And then because they took dedicated time for care come back ready to work and be more productive. How did you navigate that as a CEO and leading PepsiCo for so long? What are the nitty-gritty policies that the other CEOs watching this could implement to help their employees navigate those shifts?
I think corporate America is doing a better job than, government America or small and medium-sized enterprises America, because we have more people who can fill jobs. I think what needs to be thought through is, if you're going to have paid leave where somebody steps out for 12 weeks or 16 weeks and comes back to the original job, as opposed to their job being replaced, we have to think of a cadre of people who can move across the company and fill some of these jobs. Clearly, you can't replace a CEO or a C-suite executive. But if it's a mid-level executive, like a Kelly Services, couldn't you have a executive group of retirees or whatever who can fill in some of these jobs that have to be functioning when this person's out? The problem we have, Maggie and Anne-Marie, I think you and I have talked about this, there's got to be creativity. There's got to be a commitment to solutions. And to say that we believe in paid leave, now let's move to how we're going to implement it. As opposed to, we don't want to talk about implementation because we don't like the fact that it requires us to think differently. So if you lean in with sort of a can-do and must-do sense of responsibility, I think we will come up with the solutions. And it can be done. It's not just hiring a lot of people so people can just leave on paid leave and we can do all the jobs. It's being able to fill those jobs strategically for the time that people are gone.
And I would add to that this is also where things like paid leave intersect broader parts of the social infrastructure like portable benefits and universal health care, because you could have a lot of people who would be perfectly willing to step in for different workers and who have either been at that company before or know that work. If you think about substitute teachers, which work some of the time and not some of the time, we all tortured our substitute teachers, but still there's an expectation that you're going to need somebody in the job when the teacher is out for whatever reasons. And you can absolutely imagine a whole group of people who don't want to work full time, who will step in creative ways, just as Indra suggests, but then they have to be able to have benefits in various ways that are not tied to the job. So that requires more innovative thinking across society.
I love these creative ideas. And I want to dig into some of the competitive advantages of offering paid leave, because you've both talked about it from such different perspectives. There's the policy level and making America more competitive on the global stage. And then there's the business perspective and making individual businesses more competitive because of the leave that they're offering. Anne-Marie, can you start off talking about the policy making competitive advantage here?
Yes. And in some ways, it's just so obvious. It's exactly as Indra says, it's a human issue. This is about investing in our present workforce, of course, enabling people to take time out to care for those they love, and then come back. But it's also investing in the next generation. Right? We know that enabling parents, however defined, to be able to attach to their infants or to care for their own parents, right? But particularly with kids, that's giving those children the best possible start in life. And from the point of view of global competitiveness as a nation and global security, and the military is very aware of this, we need to invest more in our children. And that includes investing in their caregivers. So as I look at this, you can think about it in terms of just where are we on the league tables of countries that enable people to care for one another, and we're way low. But you can also look at it as what countries are doing the best job of ensuring that their future population can compete in the global economy and compete in a global security environment.
Indra, what about the business? What's the business argument? How can businesses use paid leave to be more competitive with each other?
I think, hiring a person costs money. Training them and retaining them is the most important thing, especially if that person's a good contributor. So now I'm separating out the essential worker from the office worker. If that person's very good, you want to hold on to every talent that you have. In a world where what differentiates a good company from a bad is the quality of the talent that you have. So I think it's very important we provide the support structures to allow people to stay in the job. So that's one side. Let me give you the other side. To our essential workers, we have to pay them a competitive wage. And we have to be very, very sensitive to the fact that they too have caregiving responsibilities. I mean, think of the teacher that Anne-Marie just talked about. That young teacher who has all the energy that they give to the young kids in elementary school, for example. They're young and they have families too. Very often what we tell the caregiver, whether in a senior home or a hospital or in a school, is that we want you to come to the senior center and stay here for 3 weeks during COVID because you can't keep going back and forth. And incidentally, your children and your elderly parents are your problem. That's not how it works. Because never once did we talk about how you're going to take care of your kids, how you're going to take care of your aging parents. All that we told them was, we need you in the hospital for 3 weeks. You can go home after 3 weeks. And so I think it's time that we looked at each person as a member of a family and said, okay, how are we going to put family in the center of our discussions? We need kids. We need families. We need the best brains to work in the economy. And they also happen to be women. And so let's figure out how to bring the best and the brightest to serve the economy and stop thinking of family as just females' problem. It's a female issue. No, family is not female. Family is family. And don't think of women in the workforce as a feminist issue. Think of it as an economist. And if you did that, I actually believe the way we discuss about all these issues will change.
I certainly hope so. We are down to our last 3 minutes, so I want to look ahead to the future. I would love to hear from each of you. What is one prediction that you have for 2022? Maybe a policy you hope to see take place or think will be implemented. So what is something that you're hopeful about and that you see coming down the line? I'll start with Anne-Marie.
I'm still applauding Indra's last remarks. Let's put family at the center of our economy and we will be all better off. So here's something I'm hopeful about. I mean, first off, I think that this next generation of men understands caregiving as a human issue much more than previous generations. Mm-hmm. But I also think we are heading for a 32-hour work weeks, whether that is going to be 4 days a week or more likely 6 hours a day. But it'll depend, and different businesses will experiment in different ways. Now, that will only work, as Indra said, if we are paying a competitive living wage for all workers, because otherwise workers have no choice. I mean, they're going to have to work way over 40 hours a week to try to survive. But if we can change the wage structure, we will have 6 hours a day of paid work and then another 4 hours for sure for unpaid work. And that can be caregiving and that can be community work. There's so much work we all do that is valuable, but not necessarily paid. But I see us in the next 10 years, maybe even the next 5, I think there's going to be a big movement ahead for a better balance between paid work and unpaid work. And we value all of it as part of human work.
My prediction, Maggie, is that all these remote technologies are going to progress so much more that it's going to truly enable flexibility. And I think that a year from now, we're going to look at Zoom and say, oh, it's so old-fashioned. Because technology has progressed so much more. Think of it, how far it's come since the last 2 years. So it's going to allow incredible flexibility. So whereas when Anne-Marie and I were, coming into the workforce, we were juggling all these priorities. We can actually move into an era where we can balance these priorities. We were hoping we wouldn't drop the ball. Now we can actually, with these technologies, balance our life and figure out how to make it all work by being present and yet not present. So I'm very optimistic about what technology can do just in this narrow sphere to enable balancing work and life.